Leslie Parson, and today I'm going to be presenting myasthenia gravis, MG. And myasthenia gravis, MG, is an autoimmune neuromuscular disorder. And what it does is it leads to having muscle fatigue, muscle weakness, just in the voluntary muscle groups. And this happens because at the acetylcholine receptors, they are blocked by antibodies. Our body, with this disorder, produces an overwhelming amount of antibodies that block the acetylcholine receptors at the postsynaptic synapse, thus affecting the electrical current to occur at that synapse. And we can, that goes into what we discussed. And here we go is an image. You can see these antibodies that the body is producing. We have the acetylcholine receptors, the neuromuscular junction, and these antibodies are preventing clear innervation of voluntary muscle groups. So the problem that we were faced with, I was as a SLP, a 19-year-old female named Emily. She had bulbar MG, as we discussed, was some of the cranial nerves being affected for swallowing and speaking. And a neurologist referred her to me because of her speech, swallowing, and breathing difficulties. So really, Emily's case, she was having insidious, gradual muscle fatigue back in September. But it wasn't until March that some of these more obvious muscle fatigue groups came to her diagnosis of bulbar MG. She was experiencing ptosis, which was an eye drooping, unilateral ptosis, drooping of the eyelid, and diplopia, unilateral as well, double vision was occurring. And she was very obviously having specific muscle weakness in the speech, mastication, and respiratory. And one of major concerns looking at Emily was she has definitely had considerable weight loss during this time. And she is 5'6", and her BMI was 15.9, which is considered very underweight, 98.5 pounds. And this was mostly reported because she was having so many problems with her mastication. She was getting very fatigued eating, and eating too much solid food, and she was also having regurgitation of the fluids going through the nose. So her biggest complaint, also being a 19-year-old, is speech. Seeing that gradual change of slurred speech, really a monotone voice, the loudness was gone. And this was not affecting her cognition. It's not a language disorder at all. It was just speech and swallowing that we were looking at, no cognitive concern. And with swallowing, as we mentioned, was the reason why her diet and weight loss was looking at her swallowing. She was having the aspiration, some choking episodes, even some, or we would want to evaluate that more, but she was noticing this herself and family. And what was interesting with her is she sometimes in the morning would notice that she felt completely normal. Some of her speaking she could articulate very well, but by the end of the day, her symptoms were more severe and she felt very fatigued. And going into her status, she was very poor and undernourished. And being her age, she really would sometimes ignore her fatigue so that she could socialize with same-aged peers. Sorry, my group over here. And yeah, she would ignore her symptoms, and she was a past volleyball player, active swimmer, and so obviously with these kinds of concerns, she would ignore her fatigue, and she was taking progestamine, which is a medication for MG, and by her kind of being frustrated with these symptoms, her medication was not as effective. And her emotional status being found that just back in March that she has MG, she felt very emotional about this, increased depression, frustration, anxiety, and stress. And this increased her symptoms of fatigue and made her medication not as effective. So in my examination, I did a stress testing, which what it does is I would have her count for 2 to 4 minutes consecutively, maybe up to 50 or 100. And as the time went, her articulation became worse and less intelligible. So this was an indication that that type of speech or continual speech is very difficult. Same with contextual speech, having her speak just on a continuous time frame, she would have more fatigue, and she also had lack of prosody, intonation, monotonation. So these were evident signs in that listening to Emily, you could hear hypernasality. Her B's and D's would be sounding nasalized noises, so you could definitely hear a nasality to her voice. And the volume of her voice was very soft, very breathy. Phonation, I would have her hold the ah. She can only do it for 3 seconds. Most can hold it for 15 to 25 seconds, so that was definitely low. The AMRs are like pa, pa, t, t. She also was lacked speed in this, and the lip, jaw areas, the articulation movements were in error. And she had weakness in the neck, but she had this unusual tension on her sternocleidomastoid and her platysma muscle, and this was kind of indicating that she held a lot of stress and anxiety in her body, which also affected her speech. So in the instrumental type of examination that I did with the instruments, we did the modified barium swallow, and this was most particular. I wanted to do this for the physiology, the anatomy of the laryngeal, oral, and esophagus areas, and it was evident that she had some soft palate, veal, pharyngeal port issues, also some of the oral, pharynx, and esophagus. And then we also did the FEES, which was showing that the silent aspiration and which was a concern, and aspiration ammonia, which is another thing. And looking at the IOPI was another one that we put underneath the tongue, and she was in a below range of her tenseness of the tongue. So in my diagnosis, in my diagnosis, I noticed that she had flaccid dysarthria, evident in the intrinsic larynx musculature, and a paralyzed abducted position of her vocal folds, and oral pharyngeal dysphagia, which was evident with the upper esophagus irregularity in the oral pharynx areas. And she is at risk of a myasthenic crisis, which could be death-threatening, where your whole body kind of goes into shock, and she could have lack of breath support. So in the treatment, some of the things that we needed to consider was some compensatory strategies: eating smaller meals, rest before your meals, take your medication with your food, and really the biggest thing, also the chin tuck we could discuss, that would help prevent aspiration. For her, the maneuver, the supraglottal swallow, could be suggested, but with her fatigue, we want to be careful on overdoing some of these strengthening activities. For the nasality, the C-scape is this tube that you breathe through, and what's nice is you can have a visual reinforcement of seeing if any air goes through the nose, and that's a strengthening activity for that. And pursed lips is going to be good for shortness of breath. That's one example, where she can breathe and then go through the lips, the pursed lips, to think about her speaking rate, talking in smaller utterances, taking smaller breaks, and also for her coordinating her breathing and swallowing, so she can do the restrictive, restrictive breathing, where she blows through, and there's an end piece that prevents her from getting all the restriction, and that kind of strengthens her neck and breathing and pulmonary support. And I think I'm going back and forth. But I don't know, just to continue the last part, I would recommend that she, with these types of symptoms, be reevaluated in 2 to 4 days, and she might be an option for a thymectomy, considering that would really benefit her conditions, and continuing her medication, and doing these exercises such as the shake or head raise to really help her in her situation. Thank you.